Good evening. My name is Jake Brillhart, and welcome again to the Tecnoglass lecture series. And thanks to them for providing the support to do these activities. This evening, we have the pleasure of having Spela Videcnik with us. Spela is an architect from Slovenia, where she established her practice OFIS architecture in 1996 with Rock Oman. Both graduates of Ljubljana School of Architecture and the Architectural Association in London. Their firm has received many accolades, more than I could list right now, but they've been nominated multiple times for the Mies van der Rohe Awards for their projects, as well as been invited to the Architecture Biennales of Venice, Moscow, and China, and Beijing. Currently, she is working as a teacher at the GSD in Boston. When Spela and Rock started their office back in the 90s, they were participated in a lot of national and international competitions where they received accolades and notoriety for their original thinking and clear concepts. They try to find issues and challenges with the project brief, the client, the material, or structural constraints of the site. These issues or limitations become inspiration for differences and create identity, something that makes their work different from the rest. By using tactics, not suppressing, confronting, ignoring the rules of limitations. So tonight, Spela will talk about housing and residential design and what it means to create a home. She'll talk about 4 projects at 4 different scales and allow us to understand the context-based approach to design and specifically exploring this notion of limitations. So it's my pleasure to welcome Spela and her lecture titled Inspiring Limitations. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time in Florida and Miami. I go to Boston frequently, but I don't travel much around the States, so it's a very nice excuse also to see your nice country. And you have a very beautiful campus, I must say, a very, very pleasant place, so I enjoyed being here. So I will start with introducing, okay, with a little bit delay, yeah, where I actually come from, because the context is so very different from the States. I come from a very small country. We are only 2 million people in the whole country. Basically, I live in the city in the middle of the country, which is called Ljubljana, and this is also where our main office is based. And there is only 1 hour to go out of the country, either to Italy or to Austria, and only 1 hour to go to the mountains or to the sea. So even if it's such a small country, we have a very, very diverse landscape, food, culture, people. And we have the sea, we have the mountains, and this is my city. It's very old. It already comes from prehistoric area, and we had Romans, we had nice Baroque culture. We also had a Gothic city. We have a castle on the hill and a lot of greenery. So this is the context where we work and where we actually grew up. We have Videčnik as an architect. It was, I will explain you a little bit later, it's a very important person for us. He was working before the Second World War and also after, and he's one of the very few architects that you also have on a banknote. And he was working in the time of functionalism, where all the architects were taking a kind of a similar route. He tried to keep its own identity, taking also ideas and inspirations from our context. So basically, this is a small church in my city that has a kind of craftsmanship local that is inspired by tradition. And for example, the columns are made out of sewage pipes. This is the library that he did with a beautiful facade with stones that he found on the site, and the interior of the lecture hall. And he also took very much care about the detail, not just the urban plan. And this is where we actually come from and where it's our context. So our office is not big, we are 20 people, but we work very diverse projects. In Europe, it's not like that offices are only focused on one program. We really work, this was our first work competition that Rok and myself won already as students. I just graduated actually one day before we received award of winning this competition. So the client was quite surprised. Rok was a little bit more lazy, let's say, so he graduated 1 year after me, even if we started the school together. So it was quite a shock, actually, for the client when they chose the winning competition that the team was so young, and the project was difficult because it was extension of the old palace, a lot of archaeological ruins. 1 year later, we won a competition for our first football stadium, so also we like to work a lot about the sport complex. And later we built another football stadium in Belarus. I'm showing just this, you can see that we are not just interested in housing. We, for example, created this little chapel a little bit outside of the city that is very much integrated in the landscape behind. We did this small museum together with some other colleagues, architects, that is devoted to a person who researched space, so that's why it has the shape of the wheel. And inside is a community center from this village where he used to live. And then I will come to our housing projects. Today I would like to share with you a different housing that we are interested in. Housing for us, a house actually is an essential part that actually each architect is interested. We like to do one-family houses still, even if always we go into minus. They are really not profitable. You can never charge a client for so much as there is work inside a project like that. But we also like to do multiple housing, affordable housing, student housing. We really believe that basically architecture starts with this essential kind of start, which is a home for a person, and this is where actually everything should start, so we always come back to housing. So our mainly, let's say, affordable housing comes from the shape that was always predetermined urbanistically. In Slovenia, in Europe, we have very strict urbanistic rules that it's difficult to change. It takes years to change them. And all our blocks had the shape of this, we call it Napolitanka, so basically of this suite. Some of them are longer, some of them are a little bit higher, but mainly they were all more or less all the same. And we did quite a lot of different modules of this housing, and always clients more or less liked the same apartments inside, meaning the same size. So let's say 15% of studio apartments, 20% of one bedroom, 40% of two bedroom, and so on. So basically, our research then mainly was in this layer between the inside and the outside, creating a space that, in a way, it's a double skin of the building, where balcony, loggias, terraces can appear. So basically, inside of the blocks of these units, more or less, we have very similar approach, simple plan, affordable, but outside is what we tried to do different, where is our research, and also where actually we wanted to give each family its own home that is different from each other. So this is one competition that we won back in 2000, I think it was maybe 4 or 3, something like that. It's housing, we call it B housing, on the seaside. So basically it overlooks the sea on one side and overlooks the parking on the other. It was a competition, a public competition, because it is invested by the government. The government in our country has quite successful mode that actually families are saving money for several years, putting money in some trust, and then they can, in few years, get mortgage with a very good condition. So this is the way how government supports young families, handicapped people, elderly people, so people who would normally not afford to buy a home, an apartment, that actually they support them. And it works quite well. So we won several competitions in this way. But always, of course, we won it because of rationality. So basically, they were making a chart which block is the least expensive and creating the most surface and the most high-quality apartments. So basically, we really tried, through mathematical rules, create something that is affordable. So as you can see here, our plans are quite simple. So they have this corridor that is, and only one stair with one elevator, and then these different types of units around that are repeated up, installations all in the same area. So the cost of this building was not supposed to be higher. I think it was at that time 750 euros per square meter of selling surface, which is quite low also for our country. Of course, in our country and Europe in general, I think is more economic to build than here, but still it was a very, very low cost. So what how we started was that we looked around and said, so how people live there in this area? They normally, of course, spend a lot of time on their balconies. The climate is very similar than here, a little bit less hot. And on the balconies, they would put all sorts of things like wardrobes, storages. They would enclose them. They would make shading. They would make external air conditioning and so on. And we said, why don't we make a module that actually contains everything inside already? So we created this module that has sides enclosed, that has shading that you can pull down, so you can basically be on the balcony in your, bikini and not being disturbed by the neighbors, and has also this natural cross ventilation. One part of this balcony is enclosed, so they can use it as a storage, and this became actually our facade. So this is a prototype when they build it, and this is how it looks at the end. So these rich colors that come from this Mediterranean site, on one side earth color, on the other side a little bit more grayish, and everything overlooks the sea. Inside, apartments are small and simple, but still, because of this extension outside, somehow they kind of embrace the nature, and they seem a little bit larger and a little bit more, let's say, even happy with the colors that they would be without this intervention. The stair is simple. Yeah. So now I will move to a different type of apartments, which is student housing that we did in Paris. It was also a competition held by a state organization in Paris, the French state organization, who bought this site that is actually on the border of railway track. So it's a tram that they were building together with our house. So it had to be really a good organized construction site. And the housing is located near Parc La Villette. For those who are in Paris, for sure must know this neighborhood. Next to it, there is a Philharmonic being built, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And again, we have this narrow block, even narrower here, because the site was between the railway tracks and between a garage for that railway. And we made 2 faces of the facade. On one side, with balconies and loggias again, that overlook the west. And on the other side, a mesh facade, entrances to the building that overlook a football field. So these are the 2 facades, and maybe it's easier, I will explain you through this. Through this little video, the whole concept and the project. So competition was invited competition, we never did anything this way. Office employed there one person, which was an ex-student who was working with us, French, and we somehow learned how to do the project in France, basically construction permit and everything. We hired local MAP engineers, local structural engineers, and it actually worked well. So on this side of the building you have the tram, as I explained, and on the back side for everything. They don't have a supervision or engineering on the site, so basically you are responsible in front of the client how the site is organized. You have to sign invoices of a construction company. You have to organize the site and take care that schedule actually works. So it's a very big responsibility, but it's I think it's a very big help because it means you can take care of the construction company. You have to listen to it, which sometimes of course, working in French also has such a pleasant moment. Normally, they are not very precise. They like to create local to do so. It was a lot of discussions. So this mesh, so this is view of this narrow building that is divided in 2 blocks with a small garden in between. It was built as prefab balconies brought on the site and enclosed with these metal elements, also prefab, and then with this max, it's called, this prefabricate that has the very bronze color. So view of these balconies and the back side, which is just a metal mesh, and then the view of apartments that are all the same. They are small studios that have a kitchenette, working place, bedroom, and they all have to be also used for handicapped. So that's another rule they have. This I will just go very quickly. It's 650 apartments, again, a module from the government, like the first one I showed you today. Very long blocks of 136 meters that had to be built in 2 years. So it's 650 apartments in 2 years, meaning finishing 1 apartment per day, which is quite a challenge. And these very long blocks that again came from this urban planning that also is a challenge, like how you do them attractive, how you diverse them. Actually the developer and the contractor was able to build this so quickly. We made modules 4 modules. So each building has 4 modules that are repeated, the same, all the floors up, and repeated and mirrored at the end. And they have prefabricated cores, bathrooms, and some elements. So this was making this development more economic and also faster to build. So what do you do with the facade? So basically we had this small leaflet, which was an invitation for a party when we were still students in London. We kept it in the office, and basically, if you see these are the apartments, SS means 2.5 bedroom, for example, G in our country means studio apartments. We started again to make these patterns that were creating again a layer of balconies, loggias, enclosed and open spaces, again creating this double skin of the building towards the outside. And even if they are repeated, they don't seem repetitive because they lose, I mean, the pattern loses itself somehow, the geometry. And later, this apartment building now is, I think, 12 years old. People who live inside sometimes want to change facade. They want to glaze more areas. They want to enclose something. And we have a deal that they always have to ask us how, and we normally try to allow everyone to do something. And in a way, this facade is so dynamic that they cannot destroy it. So there is underground with 2 garages and just a few photos of construction sites. It's a simple concrete block with this double facade and the view from the river. And some view of the inside. Even if these are affordable apartments, so basically they were, again, mainly for young families. The interior is quite clean, it has big windows. It's PVC, that's how we could make it affordable, actually, windows, but they are black from outside, white from inside, and very nice wooden floor. Close to it, it's another social housing. Again, the same, let's say, start, the same urban start with apartments repeated. And here we tried to do with balconies something that is overlooking only on the side, because the view to the left and to the right, straight view, was not so open, so nice. So we made this kind of fishbone again, balconies, loggias. Each apartment has partly glazed area, partly opened area, and overlooks only towards the side when the view is nicer and more intimate. And these are the inside, so these bay windows are creating living areas and bedrooms that are, let's say, have bigger quality, spatial quality than they would have just like a straight facade. I will just go quickly through this one. I just want to show you all the different approaches we had. So basically, again, a building in similar way. And here we played with terraces, stripes of color of this region. This is close to Italian border in Slovenia. Then we have terraces, kind of partly covered, partly uncovered, quite large, and the colors taking from that region. Apartments are more or less very similar in all these modules, and again, you can see inside that these bays are creating quite rich interiors. So now I will move to one, let's say, research or something we are trying to do. I was starting with Videčnik and maybe, you know, be yourself, everyone else is already taken. This is also what we are, of course, you know, thinking of. The older you are, the more you are thinking of that. Even, I think, Kim Kardashian is thinking about kind of, you know, identity. So our identity, look for identity, is Alpine vernacular architecture. We all like to go to the mountains a lot. Both partner Rok and myself, we have a small house in the mountains. And we always look at these beautiful buildings that we have. These are hierarchs, for example. They are very typical in Slovenia, and I think they are nowhere else. It's like beautiful old wooden structures to dry hay. And for us, they are big inspirations for everything we try to do in this part of Slovenia. And basically, I would like to show you, for example, this small house. It's a family house that it's a refurbishment of an old barn that looked like that before and looks like this today. So basically, outside keeps totally the same elements. And this is how it was before, and this is what is created after. So just creating a little bit of openings before, and I can show you again a little movie. So a lot of these old structures in Slovenia and also elsewhere, of course, people don't know what to do with it. Normally they are owned by very simple people, farmers. And they really destroy a lot of them, build instead of them houses, because they don't know if this is something that can actually be refurbished and used as a house instead of a barn. And for us, this is, of course, really a big pity. We're losing a lot of national heritage and our own identity. It's important for a small nation like we are to keep something that is only, let's say, belongs to us. And this really, as architects, we kind of took as our mission that we will try to show that this is something we should be proud of, keep. And after this refurbishment, it was quite published a lot in various newspapers that is, read by general people, not architects in Slovenia. And we get calls sometimes from simple, let's say, farmers who have a house like that. And this became for them inspiration that actually they're trying to keep it. Even, it's not they would hire us as architects or anyone else, but it was a big inspiration. So hopefully with this little, project, we kind of managed that some of our heritage is not going to be destroyed. But otherwise, it's a simple refurbishment. Outside wood is just left as it was. The roof was left as it was. We had to change some tiles because they were broken. We opened the windows only in a way that we perforated existing wood, and inside we added the thermal insulation. We have these elements. For example, the toilet is a typical toilet of that era in this way. And in our country, we have quite strong earthquakes, so basically all contemporary living spaces need to be made for earthquakes, against earthquakes, and all the interventions the structural engineer did are actually hidden inside the wood, so basically with small metal, let's call it shoe embracement, we call it, we managed to make this building also earthquake proof. So inside simple wood is just spruce everywhere. It's the most economic wood you can find in our country. So spruce on the floor, spruce for the furniture, the ceiling, the sauna, everything. And these small buildings also for us are inspiration how to, for example, do a social housing. This is a social housing in the Alpine area of Slovenia that we did some time ago. That has balconies that take the elements, and the roof that actually looks like it's pitched, but it's not. It's a flat roof with a covering like that, and inside of that we are hiding all the chimneys, all the air conditioning, all the systems that you have to place on the roof today. So you can see in the section here. Or, for example, this housing that we did on top of one shopping mall. It's vacation homes for families in a nice area of Slovenia, where also we took elements and materials out of this heritage. or this small apartment house for skiers that again has the roof that hides installation, that has these concrete tiles that remember on slate and wooden elements from the heritage. And this is also what we try to teach our students a little bit, especially in America, that heritage is something that needs to be considered and studied because you can learn a lot of it. And when it was crisis here in America, of course, the crisis in 2008, I think it happened here in Slovenia, it came in 2010, and for several years, our construction market was really, really bad. So we didn't have so much work. And then we thought, you know, what do we do when we don't have so much commercial work? What would we do just, you know, like that for us? And then we went into research how to do small alpine shelters. Because we like the mountains, we like shelters, we like research, and actually it was affordable that you can actually find donation to build one and test it how it's working. So this is how we started a year before we did the studio with Harvard students. So basically research how you do a shelter, a minimum space that can actually be placed by helicopter on top of the mountain and then used there and against all the avalanche, the snow, all the wind conditions and all the extreme conditions that are going on the mountains, kind of be structurally, mechanically, and in all these terms calculated that it works. So we had a studio devoted to this, and students did all sorts of buildings, like for example this one that is opens and closed, or this one that is very small and the person can just be inside the unit, or this one that is a kind of observation tower, and this one that in a way was then chosen by a local mountaineers in Slovenia to be placed on a site where an old shelter had to be taken away because it was in a bad condition. And we managed to get donations and bring those students to Slovenia and change the plans so they were working better than they were before. And it's a simple building that has 3 modules that are horizontally organized, that has these roofs that a little bit remember on vernacular architecture, that have 3 spaces. 1 is for socializing and 2 are for sleeping. And it was placed on this part where the old shelter was removed. This is how we, for example, did foundations. We had to go all the way down to the hard rock. And I will show you a little movie. Why this research is interesting? Because you have to calculate, for example, first the structure. It has to work against the wind, against the heavy snow. It needs to work also when the helicopter moves one module, it should be light, otherwise the sun is actually the air, the pressure of the air goes in a way that you can lift it against the gets warm because of the human temperature. So it's a very pleasant, always if we come there, or sometimes we get feedbacks, people are very happy about staying there, so yeah. So this is the modules, the way they were put together, and the view out. This is a shelter that we did before. We did the studio at Harvard, but we placed it later because we had some problems with less donations of the facade, so we didn't manage to get all the materials on time. It's new on site, and it works actually as a winter cabin. So it's placed close to an existing cottage, and it's mainly used for when the cottage is closed. So basically, cottage would be open only in summer months, but this building is used by mainly mountaineers, skiers, and cave researchers, because we have a lot of caves in these mountains. It's a karst area. So this shelter, we tried to do totally different. So if the first one I showed was metal frame with wooden interior and concrete cladding, and it was horizontally done, this one is vertically organized, one cell only, so basically just one cabin, and it's made of wood that works as structure and as interior and also as thermal isolation, partly. And outside is cladded in metal. So we did it again, we finished it totally in the workshop, then we brought it to this area where that has a little airfield. We almost finished it in this area, and then brought it up again by a helicopter to this edge of the mountain. So it's really kind of, you know, looking towards beautiful view. You can see the sea from this mountain, and you can sleep in these 3 beds, bunk beds, one above each other. And this is the interior, so basically the structural wood also creates furniture. Then more units that we were interested, especially in that day. So this is a modular unit that we did as a research for refugees. Probably, maybe you remember that in Europe we have a big problem with refugees coming from east because of war. Mainly Syria and so on, and they, at some point, a year and a half ago, there was really a big problem in Europe, and we then tried to think how we could do a modular unit that would be affordable enough that maybe our city could afford to buy some and show that you can also host the refugees in a nicer, in a nicer home. So we then had dialogues with the city, but then somehow this crisis got better because now they European community made some agreement with Turkey, so they're all kept there. So we'll see. I don't know what will happen. Nevertheless, we did this research making a wooden tower. We applied for some funding from the Ministry for Wood. That gave us a little bit of money so we could actually finish this building. Again, it's in wood. Again, different approach, so it's a different wooden structure with trusses and beams. And we placed this unit in Milano furniture fair last year, Milano di Mobile, and then brought it in Ljubljana and put it on the castle, where it worked through summer as a library. So basically we put inside a library where you can come and sit here on the grass, enjoy this view, and the interior was filled with books. And now probably it's going to go to London, so it's kind of a traveling prefab structure. So interior again is small and simple. You have kitchen, you have stair that creates also shelves, you have like possibility for the bed, a bathroom, a small bathroom made in steel. And the last little project I will show, it's also a cabin that we just finished recently in Spain. It is a hideaway, let's say, a kind of vacation escape made of glass. It was to prove that you can live and well in a glass inside the desert. collaboration again with this glass company, Guardian, that creates these coatings on glass that are almost invisible for the eye, so they are transparent, but still they don't allow sun to go in. Glass is so well done that actually it also structurally works without columns, so everything is here just standing on glass. There is no metal support. These black elements that you can see is just joint one glass to another. And then we made the porch and the roof in wood, so you can see it here. Again, it's a prefab element that we made totally until the end, until the last detail in this small workshop in Slovenia. And then they brought it to Spain on this beautiful hill. It was a research with AKT structural engineers from London and Transolar. It's MAP engineers from Germany. They were calculating because, of course, here is no infrastructure, so there is no water, there is no electricity, there is no sewage. So this is a kind of self-contained unit that has photovoltaic that creates, also when it's really, really hot, it can get up to 50 degrees centigrade in summer. So there is a little air conditioning unit, but you can actually be inside without air conditioning. It goes from 50 to 28 degrees centigrade, which is actually quite well. And in glass, just in glass. So basically glass has, it's a triple glazing that has 3 different coatings. Like I said, almost invisible, but calculated in a way that they stop the sun and overheat to enter. So this is something that we are really interested in besides our, let's say, more commercial work, the work that gives us bread. And keeps us interested, keeps us meeting interesting people like the London structural engineers that really made possible that everything is standing on glass, that actually this wood is somehow just through joints connected. Of course, there are very, very strong winds, even snow in this area. It's really extreme climate. We had snow now. This thing was placed there, I think, in January, and it was a lot of snow, January, February, and now it's getting really hot. I'm going to stay there. I decided end of June and see how it is working. So, but nevertheless, they are trying to rent this house through Airbnb, and they want to trace what people say. And it's interesting, of course, because of course normally they say good and they say bad things, and something that keeps you going and trying to be better in your next project. So inside it's also, let's say, glass. So I will finish with this little project for tonight. So thank you for your patience.
Well, thanks, Spela. That was great. The videos make it incredibly dynamic.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyway, I wanted to sort of jump back quickly to when you started talking about your first commission and the fact that many students of that are here and other places, they go to school, they go to an office, they work for a great architect for 5 to 10 years, and then they go off and start their own practice. And you mentioned briefly you won I think it was in 98, you won 3 competitions.
Yes.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And sort of tell us about how it might be a more normal path in Europe that this happens, these competitions, and what that can do to a young office. I think the students would love to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, basically, we met, Rok and myself, we worked together a long time. We are not in private life together. It's like, thankfully, we are very different, but we are, of course, very close friends in a way, almost like a family. Now we met in the first year of studies, and they put us somehow together to work on the first project in the school, and we stayed together working until today. So basically we did almost all projects together in the school, and then later the school in Ljubljana was good in a way, but not so intense. So we were bored in a way, and we were all the time during the studies really interested to join workshops, international workshops. It was very important for us to go out of the country because it's such a small environment. And then do competitions. And I must say that there was a little bit of luck in our early years because Slovenia got independent in '91. And when we finished our studies, there were a lot of competitions because the country grew economically in that time. And also all the system broke up somehow. Before we started, mainly architects were employed by big state-owned offices, and then these offices got bankrupt. It was a total change of everything. And somehow we young guys and them, let's say older architects with experience, were put in the market fresh. They didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to do it. And mainly when you entered competition in that time, you didn't need to prove that you have an office with a big portfolio. You didn't need to provide bank guarantees, insurance, high insurances and things like that, which today maybe sometimes it's a problem for young people when they start. But then no one had that. So basically everyone could enter a competition, everyone could win it, and we were, young, fresh, with a lot of energy and let's say even luck at that time. So we won these competitions that kept us starting the office. But even then, we decided to go and study more. So we went and we applied for stipendium to study at the AA, and we received it, thankfully, from different sources. We received some parts of money, which made us possible to actually go there.
Were you doing that while you were working on the museum?
Yes.
So
Actually, all these projects, they start slowly normally because, for example, especially the museum, they had to start digging and see what heritage is under. They had to dig really slow because it's a lot of archaeology and so on. So basically, during our studies, we were going up and forth. It was really important for us. It was just 2-year postgraduate study, but it was important for us to get more knowledge. And I think it was correct, even if at that time when we came back to Slovenia, for some years we didn't win any competition. So I don't know, this change, but it opened up other let's say, possibilities.
Wow,
So this is the way we started.
Being able to start out an office without all that insurance and all that portfolio sounds like a dream.
Yeah.
And then that first commission, which was the Municipal Museum in Slovenia, and I was reading about your work, and it talks about these limitations and how you deal with the local context, and that building being in the heart of the city, and you really had to, and being the first major project, I'm assuming.
Yes.
How did that, most people when they start their office, they don't get a museum.
Yeah.
They get one of those little incredible, not even those cabins that you were showing, but your work is grounded in a way, like you said you had to work with the archaeologists and there were Roman ruins on that site, and that these limitations or these things that were embedded into that museum project, did they really start, did that 6-year, 8-year adventure start to solidify some of the major ideas that are still contributing to the work today?
Yeah, I would say so. Especially we do still like to work. I didn't show other projects today that deal with preservation and conservation, but it's something we really enjoy and like to do. because you never know what you're going to find when, they start peeling off, layers that were done later. A lot of surprises can be found, and this is really beautiful. And then that you somehow have a position against this heritage, but then, of course, as an architect who wants to, also leave your traces, somehow create, intervention that is contemporary, but on the other hand has some kind of dialogue with old structures. This is something we are really interested in. Yes, these limitations, like you mentioned, we always took them as a challenge and as a possibility that each of our work we do is a little bit different from the previous one, that keeps us interested and keeps us enthusiastic about working.
No, it's the work is incredible. You mentioned Videčnik in the talk. I was wondering if you could expand. I know the students have all heard of Videčnik, but I was wondering, working in the heart of the city and knowing the work so well, if you could talk a little bit about how that architecture has sort of infused you, whether it's culturally or spiritually or formally, in what capacity?
Yeah, I mean, for me, he's a very important figure, especially, like I mentioned before, because he was really keeping its own language in the identity in the, area of modernism, when all the rest were going, in a similar, let's say, way. And this is for us really, something important, to achieve maybe. It's his work is really embedded in every corner of our city, from urban plan to interventions, around the river, small, even glasses in churches or small stairs that appear every now and then. So it's really subtle elements that you notice. Even today, I notice sometimes, either for the first time or for the first time with different eyes. It's really, something that is inside us and give us a kind of challenge as well.
I have one more question. You talked about when the economy sort of slowed down and you looked at those Alpine cabins. If and when the economy slows down again, do you know where you're headed, or do you have any idea in terms of research? Or is that usually tied with the times?
We have some ideas of what, for example, we would like to research more. Like, for example, at the moment, our state is trying to invest money, but not in a very successful way, into making some buildings from the 70s and 80s more energy, with less energy consumption. So they are trying to, either putting more isolation and refurbishing the window elements and so on. So they're giving donations. They're supporting the city. And this is, for example, something we are interested in. We started this little research I didn't mention today in one school in Ljubljana. It's a public building, very badly, let's say, isolated. So, for example, this is something that is not very profitable, but it's a challenge for us, because some of these housings or schools or public facilities are really beautiful, and we would like to maintain that beauty, and they really damage them with, changing elements like windows, adding layers of facades, and so on and so on. So this is, for example, something we are doing now, and it's not profitable.
Well, hopefully it will be.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to open it up to anyone else that has some questions.
Yes. Here in Miami, the cost of housing is extremely high. And one of the ways that people are addressing that is by trying to build smaller and more efficient units. But when you do multifamily housing, if you have smaller units, then the community space becomes even more important. And I was just wondering, on the student project and the affordable housing project, what kind of community space, shared space is available?
Yeah, in student housing, we do have shared spaces, such as, for example, library, living room. even the rooms like laundries where actually they are made so students can actually meet and discuss and so on and so on. But in this affordable housing or social housing that we did, it was really what made us win the competition, what made us win that project, to do a very functional building, because they kind of calculated the cost of the building against the usable surface they can sell, and that's apartment units. So basically, unfortunately, in these social apartments and living units, we don't have any spaces where people could have common space, socialize, and so on. It's really about having minimum of that communal spaces against maximum of selling surface that made us win the competition. So unfortunately, of course, I would agree that these are elements that would be very important, but if we would insert them in this mathematics that is kind of valued, who wins the project, we would not succeed. So, sorry. Yes, it's something we are very interested in this kind of creating a simple unit and then aggregate it, that in a way that simple unit creates also other spaces.
Because like when you compare it to the unité d'habitation that you showed, there also it's a modular structure that is constituted of different units, but they aggregate into something where they lose their individuality, right?
Yes.
And the whole takes over, whereas in your housing project, there's always, what you are always foregrounding is the unique, each unit is unique, and it comes together as a whole, but without actually losing the uniqueness and individuality of that, which I think is an interesting project for housing, which is all about repetition and modularity. So how can you maintain the individuality of the unit as something that is expressed on the facade? So you can see this is mine, there it's different, and while actually being able to construct this modular systems. I'm wondering if this is a deliberate.
Yes, it is deliberate, because basically the brief is, like I explained, always very similar in affordable housing. Let's say you have a block that you need to keep the certain height, the certain width, the certain length. You cannot do anything out of that because it's urbanistically predetermined. Then, like I explained, almost all the clients like the same structure of apartment that in a way we create, and yes, we repeat, mirror, we really play a lot with that repetition, mirroring, but we always try to create something that makes each individual apartment a little bit different, and then when you put these cells together, create also spaces in between that create this diversity.
So here's my question. Do you tie this to a new conception of society as a multitude rather than like the shift basically that we are seeing now in the conceptions of society, a shift from mass culture to a multitude. So basically definition of society where individuals they come together collectively, but because they have similar, have similar motivations, but they remain individuals and they are not subsumed by some kind of idea of a mass society or mass culture. So I'm just wondering if these are the things that you are interested in.
Yes, we are, for sure, yes.
Oh, that's another question. In the building that you had the glass supporting the roof, you mentioned that the glass has a high solar reflectivity. It obviously has to have a certain structural strength to be able to support the roof as well. Because we live in South Florida, we have to deal with hurricanes, and I really thought that was a really interesting concept, the glass house. Do you know whether, I'm assuming that this glass is impact resistant?
Yes, yes.
And so on?
Yes, I mean, actually, I could ask the structure engineers. They really made a good job. It was also from their side a research, right? So they really did all the calculations. We don't have hurricanes. There are no hurricanes in that area, but there is really, really strong wind, really strong. And basically, they have all this calculation how the wind could come under and lift the roof up, and it's kind of special joint of glass, and that wooden. It's a sandwich. Made of wooden plates above, below, that are connected in a way that they always are one above each other. So the joints are really strong, glued, and then they have these trusses in between. And then the glass comes between those trusses. There is a hole in the glass, and it's screwed through. So it cannot happen, actually. I could ask them, it could be a good question, if this building would survive in Florida. So I will actually ask them and I can let you know. Yeah, with the hurricanes, yeah. It would be a challenge for them as well.
Is it already on Airbnb?
If it's
It's on Airbnb right now?
They said, I don't know if it is or not, I really didn't follow,
Students are probably
but
checking
yes,
as we
but
speak.
the
I saw some
client
of them were
said
like-
that this is the way they are going to do
I
it.
love
I don't
it.
know if they started already, but for sure they want to do it at some point. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Anybody else? Yeah?
I know this is your first time in Miami. I think the housing market in Miami is very, I'm sure globally too, commercially driven. But it seems like in Slovenia it's more about family and the way of life. I wanted to know what you thought about that, trying to make housing more to improve the way of life in the family. It seems like that's what the firm.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's very important that, we do, for example, now we are doing one commercial housing that has a little bit different approach, but still, it comes from similar ideas like the ones I showed. But it is really important that, in a way, we did impact with this housing, allowed these families to actually buy and afford the house. For example, the block, the fishbone block that I showed, when they had a lottery, when they wanted to get an apartment, and it was 60 people, 60 families applied for one apartment. It was so, and then it's really nice still now to get feedbacks of people. Even it's, we really try to take these challenges of when they, for example, the family grows and they want to stay inside and they need more space, they would glaze sometimes the balcony and change it into a very small kid's bedroom. We, in a way, try to see how we can make it. So it is important for us to see, and it's always, for me, even, let's say I have a kind of, when I go to see the housing, after several years it's finished, you can see on the balconies, on the windows, if people who live inside are happy or not. You can really sense that, in the driveway, outside, in the parkway, how the building is succeeded, its mission. And I always have, a little bit of, oh my God, what am I going to see after several years coming? Is it aging well? Is it not aging well? And it's actually nice to see when you see that, you know, people have, you know, flowers, plants, they have, you know, chairs outside, then you have a feeling you actually really managed to create a nice home for someone, and that's very important.
No, I think your comment is great, and it speaks to the work that you're doing if the students are recognizing that you're building and adding to that heritage of Slovenia and making homes. I think probably here we could work on stop thinking about so much of selling lifestyles as building people's homes. We might take note of what you've been up to. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. This was
thank
great.
you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.